name is Renee Cyprian. We're out here to protest the forced move of Irish Canadian. We're here because she's a 100-year-old resident of this building over here who's trying to be evicted from her home. She's been living here for over 40 years now. She is 100 years old. And what we're trying to do is to keep her apartment, to keep her housed. The question is, if she is put out, where does she go at 100 years old? Where is the undergirding that she needs right now from the mayor's office and the supervisors? They know about this, and I've not heard a thing about it. They've not come forward. Our district supervisor is absent. We have a mayor and a board that does not care about individuals who are middle class and below. All of the development is high-rise luxury condos. Where is the affordable housing? If there was affordable housing and they want to convert this to condos, then she would have a space to live. Currently, where would she go? At 100 years old, where would I go trying to find housing? So what we need an administration in this city that cares for all San Franciscans, not just the well-heeled. And when we get to that place, this will be really a progressive city. Right now, the city is an oppressive city for the low income and the poor.
And isn't it the case that when people are moved at a high old age like that, a lot of them die?
Well, didn't we have a case somewhere down the peninsula where this woman was living in a home and she was promised to live there until she died? She was 99 years old, I think about 99 years old. They had her to move, and she died several months later. That's the issue right here.
So eviction equals death in these cases?
I believe eviction equals death, especially in this case for our seniors who are at this age. You know, the question is like a tree. When you uproot an old tree, it will die. It's very difficult to uproot an old tree and replant it where it would flourish.
Well, some other cities have talked about a moratorium on evictions. What's your view about that? I think Richmond and others are saying that there's an emergency, that people need places to stay, and there should be a moratorium.
I agree with you. Richmond has the right idea. But this city is supposed to be one of the most progressive cities in the United States, does not have that view. We've never heard from our supervisors or our mayor that we should embrace this policy. This policy has been ignored. The low income have been ignored. We've had people who've lived in San Francisco their whole lives, lived here, went to school here, born here, but can't live here. People are leaving the city going as far as Santa Clara, to live. And this should be a city for everybody. Everybody should have an opportunity to live in this city, especially those who've been here for 40 years or more in an apartment. But to have her undergo all of this, it's amazing the stress. Imagine the stress on this 100-year-old woman. I look at her as my grandmother. She could be your grandmother. So what do we do? What do we do about that? So I'm hoping that there'll be a positive resolution, that the owners of this building will have a heart and say, okay, enough is enough.
My name is Iris Marians, and I am the great niece of Iris Canada, who is a percentage owner in this 6-unit building across the street that she's lived in since, I guess I want to say maybe 70 years or so.
Before you were born?
Before I was born. I have little baby pictures of me in front of the building, and my mom at one time lived on the top floor where that lady next door is screaming from. My aunt used to live in that unit, and my uncle did a lot of the fencing in the back. It's since changed. It was owned by a man that we all knew and loved, and he loved my aunt. And his family is still around, and they said, wow, had they known that this would happen, they don't want to see this happen to my aunt. They never thought this would happen to my aunt. And Mr. Stevenson, who used to own the building, he said my aunt would always have a place to live. So
what happened? How did this process take place?
The process took place. Peter Owens was aware that my aunt was traveling, and my aunt became ill in 2012, and she was hospitalized. And when she came out of the hospital, she wanted to recuperate at my mom's home. During that time, we realized that my mother had stage 3.5 cancer. So it was kind of two blows at once. Keeping those two together, looking after them together, was the family's plan. Once my mother opted out of chemo, they traveled. Peter Owens was well aware. What he did was take advantage of a family hardship. He went into my aunt's unit without authority. He removed documents, and then he tried to position himself and the other tenants along with him because he self-financed their purchases for their flats. There is a city and county guideline to condo conversion. Please, if anyone is listening, read it. What Peter Owens and the other tenants in this building are trying to do is circumvent that process. And in circumventing that process, he sued my aunt. He sued her because she was away at the hospital, because she was traveling and visiting relatives. He and these other people perjured themselves in a court of law. So apparently, privilege, when my aunt looks in the mirror, she sees privilege, and privilege makes her invisible. He spent $164,000 for damages that he claimed, and we still don't know what the damages are, were $600. It doesn't smell right. It doesn't pan out right. I'm not sure what the judge was actually thinking when he had a person on fixed income. He stipulated that my aunt prevailed, and then he also stipulated that she, on a separate motion, they would be allowed to file for attorney's fees. So it didn't really make a lot of sense, and I believe that Judge Robinson went out of his way to make sure that anything that Peter Owens and the other folks in this building said, whether it was hearsay or not, was actually fact to him. No one checked the facts. My aunt has been harassed for 2 years, stalked, camera pointing at her front door and back door. There are several police reports to confirm this. There's several SFPD reports. The DA's office, I understand, is looking at it, not sure where they are with it. There were fraudulent documents attached to my aunt's deed of trust, and there were fraudulent documents sent to me from Peter Owens asking my aunt to sign the condo conversion, have it notarized and sent back to him. Her attorney at that time said, wait a minute, this is a little premature. They imposed a false timeline, but they're saying she held up the condo conversion. Well, if he sued her, isn't it he that held up the condo conversion? So everything they're doing, they're blaming on her. And what they can't blame on her, they're blaming it on me. He's insulting our family's integrity. We don't want to be under any type of Peter Owens covenant. He has my aunt under a covenant, which says she has to be the sole occupant of her unit. When she signed that, or when that was discussed, my aunt was in her late 80s. So clearly, they took a chance and they hoped that she would pass. And that's what's really at play here.
Do you think there should be a moratorium on evictions? A lot of people are being evicted in San Francisco. Do you think that the laws are being misused or manipulated to get rid of people for profit of some people?
I absolutely believe that there should be a moratorium. I believe that the state legislation called the Ellis Act is being abused. Peter Owens is a property prospector. He does not live in this city, but he has control of my 100-year-old aunt. He has control of her very life, along with these other people that met her in this building. There's something wrong with that. This is elder abuse. The judge's decision is tantamount to elder abuse. There's no other way to look at it. It's racism, it's elder abuse, it's criminal. He changed the locks on my aunt's door. We came home and she couldn't get in. Her doorbell doesn't ring in her apartment, it rings in another unit. You have to wonder all of the little stunts that were pulled.
And where's the city on that? City officials, the mayor, the supervisors?
We're trying to meet with any supervisor that will meet with us. We'll meet with any elected official.
Have any of them come forward and say she should be not evicted? Or she should be able to stay in her
London Breed came to one of our court hearings. I think people were outraged, and we went to the Hall of Justice. People were outraged at what they're seeing happen in San Francisco. My aunt's been abused. She's been harassed to the point of a stroke and in the hospital. People should be in handcuffs. This is absolutely criminal. When you have 13 people that have 24 access to a person's home, front and back door, and they're doing it for the interest of their own financial desires, that's criminal.
Now, you say that there's racism involved. Do you think ethnic cleansing is going on in San Francisco?
I absolutely think ethnic cleansing is going on in San Francisco. The woman who lives on the top floor just called me a bitch. She called me a lot of things. Even the attorneys for the other side, they refer to me with the B word. On this block, I was called the N word not once, but 3 times. There's a problem in San Francisco. I grew up here. I grew up at 928 Broadway between Turk and Golden Gate. It's one of the most beautiful Victorians on the block. When Peter Owens sold this unit to my aunt through when she purchased her life estate, Peter Owens didn't grant it to her. He didn't give her anything. That's been the perception. Peter Owens took the rental property off the market, so she became an owner, but she purchased her life estate through Old Republic title for $250,000. However, he sold the other units for a little more than that. So I think who got messed up in the deal here? She did, because she has lost opportunity. She could have a relative living with her. Instead, she has to go through the court system to figure out how to care for herself. There's something wrong with that picture when people feel entitled enough to be the shepherds of your health, to make decisions for you that work against you. Her life estate absolutely does not allow her to age in place. It says she has to be the sole occupant. So what if she decides to get married? What if she needs a relative to take care of her? We have relatives in Texas that are willing to move here and care for her. She has the opportunity to purchase. The condo conversion guidelines say that Peter Owens must notify her of the condo conversion. He must offer her a life estate, a life lease, or either he must present a purchase price, recorded with the city and county. That is what he's been trying to circumvent all this time, and that's why you see this woman being evicted. Not because she violated, because Peter has said in his own words, she did nothing wrong. So if she did nothing wrong, and you launched a lawsuit against a 98-year-old woman, there's something wrong with that picture. He's used Andy Zach's. I looked in the court documents, he was in the same predicament in 2001. So he and Andy Zach's go back a long way.
Who is Andy Zach?
Andy Zach's is with Zach's and Friedman. They are well known for trying to evict very, very senior and vulnerable people.
They have a history.
They have a history of it. They've been all over the news. And in the legal community considers them unscrupulous. They've lied. They've gone in court and said that I've had 10 lawyers. They've tried to discourage lawyers from taking her case. I have the emails and everything to prove it. So I'm not sure why Peter Owens keeps saying to the press that he cares so much for my aunt when he is the one that has filed a lawsuit, orchestrated the attack on my aunt. Once she had a stroke, his attorneys filed and filed and filed and filed. When he had a chance to set the attorney's fees aside, he did not. But yet and still, he keeps saying he wants to see my aunt stay in her unit. He wants to see her stay here. He keeps saying that over and over, but he's doing the opposite, and he's trying to blame her. And since he can't really blame her, he's blaming her family.
Is he killing her by this kind of harassment and stress on her?
It's murder in the public's eye. Yes, he is killing her. But Peter's a well-seasoned, appointed official. He's a public servant. He is the head, or was the head of community and economic development for the city of Burlington, Vermont, which makes him a well-seasoned, he's laced with the privilege of creating affordable housing for the city of Burlington, Vermont. It's incredible that he's in San Francisco being a property prospector, removing property from the rental market when there's a housing crisis. I think there's a conflict of interest there. So is this the think leadership of our country? Because if it is, it's murderous.
Just down a couple of blocks in the Fillmore.
Long live Midtown!
Yeah, we've been on a rent strike for the past year. My friends, my neighbors, about as old as Irish Canada, are facing constructive eviction because their rents went up a couple of 100%. We said no mas. We've been on a fight for the past year. So we stand here in full support of our neighbor. We cannot let another elderly black woman be evicted out of the house.
No!
We cannot let gentrification tear apart our neighborhoods, tear apart our community, and throw us out to Vallejo
Good morning. Let me give all honor and praise to the Most High. My spirit is really moved to see so many of you out here that are conscious enough to know that the banksters and the robbers are still trying to steal and rob this community of its history, of its culture. And I think the measure of a city is how they treat the widows, the orphans. How do they treat our elderly? And this is shameful that a woman that is 100 years old, we should be here celebrating the Most High for giving us to know that we can live beyond a retirement age, that we can live long enough to have walking institutions that can share the history of this city and of this nation and of this world. But instead, what do we have? We have some gangsters, we have some banksters, we have some greedy people trying to put a 100-year-old woman in the street. Where are the preachers? Where are those that are calling for the moral authority? Where are they? How could you sleep today and know that this kind of thing is happening? I'm so glad that those that are involved and committed. I happen to be a dues-paying member of ACE. I'm also with the Justice for Mario Woods, Alexis Aneto, Jessica, and all of those that have been murdered by these police that think that they can get a, what do they call it, a paid vacation by killing black and brown. But this is ridiculous. And we can't let this thing go. Where is the man? Where are those folks that have been elected to protect this city at a time like this? So I just want to encourage everybody. Let's stay in touch with all of the organizations that are committed to saving the dignity of our elders. There's elder abuse going on, and those that are in authority are sound asleep. Or if they're not asleep, they are a part of it. And we need to pull the covers off of everybody that is involved in this crime, because that's what it is. It's a crime against the elderly. Compassion con el pueblo, un día Samara Supremo.
Tommy Avicoli Mecca from the Housing Rights Committee. Today's a national day of action by renters. There's actions happening all over the country, all over the Bay Area. And here in San Francisco, we chose to be here for Iris Canada because she's being evicted. She's 100 years old. She's being evicted. She could be evicted as soon as next Wednesday. So we wanted to be here to support her.
What does it mean for a 100-year-old person to be evicted?
There is no need. It's totally immoral. There's never going to be any justification for evicting a 100-year-old. This is totally insane and immoral, and we feel like we need to be here to say that and bear witness to the fact that this is wrong. Absolutely wrong.
Should there be a moratorium on evictions?
Well, of course, I think there should be. I think...
Any politicians in San Francisco supported a moratorium? There seems to be an emergency here.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any politicians supporting a moratorium. You'd have to ask them. I mean, when I've talked to politicians about the subject, you know how it is. You don't always get a direct yes or no answer.
But I mean, it means death for elderly. I mean, people like this, I mean, they're going to die. In many cases, they have died. Isn't that an emergency situation?
I agree. I think it is an emergency, and people do die. The woman in Burlingame died. Lola McKay died in the Mission back during the first dot-com boom. Iris had an attack when she saw the sheriff's notice. So yeah, it definitely affects your health. It definitely is a health emergency in this country, and it should be seen as a health emergency in this country. And that's part of the reason for this day of action, is to draw attention to that. This is a national issue, and it is a national emergency, and the politicians in this country need to take it seriously and treat it as an emergency and do something about it.
So has there been any politician in San Francisco that said she should not be evicted?
Well, there have been. Certainly there have been.
Who's standing up and saying there should be no eviction?
Well, London Breed has certainly, said that, and other politicians have said that. Yes.
How many people are being evicted in San Francisco, say in the last year? Is there an epidemic of evictions?
The problem is it's impossible to put an actual number on it. You can look at the rent board statistics and there'll be a number there, but a lot of landlords do not file with the rent board the way they're supposed to. And there's no enforcement. There's no way for the rent board to enforce that or go after them. So what we have is we have a rough estimate. And from the charts that the rent board puts out every year, we see that the evictions are rising. But the number we're getting from the rent board is a huge underestimate. I would say it's at least double or triple what the rent board's saying, whatever the rent board's saying at this moment. Because there's a lot of buyouts, there's a lot of people who leave because their landlord verbally threatens them. None of that gets recorded. So it's impossible to say, but I would say that there's an epidemic of evictions happening, not only in San Francisco, but throughout the Bay Area.
You think the developers and speculators are in charge of San Francisco?
I think developers, speculators, and investors have always been in charge of San Francisco and probably all of our big cities. I mean, we live in a capitalist society. The reality is money drives everything, and they're the folks with the money. So, of course, their voice is louder at City Hall. They've got the green to back them up.
So what is the solution to what seems to be a systemic problem of people being driven out of their homes, elderly being driven out of their homes? What do you see the solution as?
Well, my solution, which some people think is idealistic, is that we gotta stop treating housing as a commodity. We gotta take it off the market. So we gotta have some way of making housing available to everybody. Like maybe go back to Roosevelt's idea of national housing, revisit that. I mean, not take that verbatim, but revisit that concept and figure out how we enact something like that. How do we take all the money out of housing, the profit out of housing? How do we give people a right to housing and give them their little piece of something? I don't know, but
You think there should be a halt to building a multi-million-dollar condos in San Francisco?
I absolutely think there should be a moratorium on market rate housing. Absolutely. There should have been years ago. There's no reason to be building market rate housing. Absolutely none. We should only be building housing for people who really, really need it, which is the working class and the poor and the homeless in this city. They're the priority. They should be the priority.
How many workers can afford to live in San Francisco?
Not very many workers can afford to live here. That the reports are coming out. Most of the police force doesn't live here. Most of our firefighters don't live here. A lot of our city workers don't live here. The reality is our infrastructure that we count on if there's an earthquake or some disaster doesn't live in the city. So what happens if there's a disaster and the bridges aren't accessible? We're really, really in trouble, and I don't know that City Hall grasps that.
Aren't they controlled by the developers and speculators?
I'm sorry?
Isn't City Hall controlled by the developers and speculators?
I would say the developers and speculators definitely have more influence in City Hall than I do, or than the tenants movement.
Well, the Planning Commission seems to be controlled.
Yeah, the Planning Commission's a problem. And it's, not to excuse what they do, but the reality is they're also bound by laws. And the problem is those laws, too, because, there's state laws.
Well, you have Kamala Harris, you have people running for Senate. What is their position on the eviction?
I don't know. I don't know what our state people are doing. Other than Amiano and Leno, I can point to them.
What about for the state race in San Francisco of Weiner and Kim? What's their position? Are they for a halt on evictions?
I don't know. I've never asked either one.
Shouldn't that be an issue in the debate?
Yeah, it should be. It should be. I agree, but I don't have time to be doing everything, and certainly electoral politics right now is not a priority in my life. The bigger priority is stopping 100-year-old African American women from being evicted from their neighborhood.
PJ from Somcan. I'm part of a youth organization, program. I'm a youth coordinator for Johanna, based out of Somcan in Saddle Market. Iris, we don't want nobody getting evicted. She's 100 years old, and that shouldn't be happening in San Francisco.
Iris stay! Let 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 Iris stay!
A flourishing African American community all over San Francisco. I saw it dwindle and change over the years to now it's the last 3.2%, and from my standpoint, we reached out to the last 3.2 to have a speaker come in, but I can represent because I'm one of that 3.2%, and I don't want to see it go to 3.1%, especially not on the back and the heart of an African American woman who has lived here for years, and she's 100 years old. How can you do that? How can you do that to a 100-year-old woman?
Shame on them.
Let us not let this go to 3.1%. Save her. Save her home. It means a lot to us. This is not right. So on that note, we have someone who's coming from, or actually we have a couple of speakers. I'm not sure who's going to speak from Frederick Douglass Haynes' apartment, and they can speak. They actually, we helped them along with some other people save their particular property, Frederick Douglass Haynes Gardens. They were trying to get them out too. They were trying to sell their property from up under them, but they can say it better. So here's another concern. A flourishing African American community all over San Francisco. I saw it dwindle and change over the years to now it's the last 3.2%, you know, and from my standpoint, we reached out to the last 3.2 to have a speaker come in, but I can represent because I'm one of that 3.2%, and I don't want to see it go to 3.1%, especially not on the back and the heart of an African American woman who has lived here for years, and she's 100 years old. How can you do that? How can you do that to a 100-year-old woman?
Shame on them.
Let us not let this go to 3.1%. Save her. Save her home. It means a lot to us. This is not right.